So let's kickstart. Shreyas, we can start now.
Okay, yeah.
Great. So thank you everyone for joining us for another, this is our 7th masterclass, and I'm sure you all have benefited a lot from these masterclass series. So in this series, we thought of starting with this topic called ESG. So as we all know that sound financial principles in investing like high ROC, ROE, low debt are important for to identify a great company. But at the same time, apart from these quantitative factors, there are a lot of qualitative factors which defines a great company. In that series, this ESG as a concept is gaining a lot of momentum globally. And as we speak, there is almost a $40 trillion of assets globally is managed under this category, with almost $250 billion of fresh inflows only in US in 2020. So that's quite a large number. And it is not like that ESG is any different type of investing. It is your usual type of investing, but it adds another parameter in terms of these three important factors like environmental, social, and governance. Let me give you a quick update, quick dope on what this environmental thing is all about. So an organization is scored on basis of their friendliness to the environmental, like carbon dioxide, efficient energy, dependability on natural resources, renewable energy, toxic emission. All these are very important factor in terms of environmental thing. And companies which follow these norms in a structured manner are always rated high under that category. Coming to the social point of view, a very simple way, and I think we have a specialist who is going to talk about it, but I thought let me share what I understand from this social thing. How we behave with our employees, how we behave with our vendors, these are very important factors to identify a great company. How the payments have been made on a timely basis, data security of the company, human capital management, health, insurance, supply chain management. So there are a lot of factors which define the social responsibility of an organization. Let's say in pharma thing, I can imagine companies which have taken a lead in terms of COVID vaccination are definitely helping the social cause also. Coming to the governance thing, and I think this is one of the very important part of the investing, that companies which manage their governance level well and which have a very well defined financial stability, anti-corruption practices, transparency and disclosure, business ethics, all these companies always get much more valuation compared to a normal company. Yeah. So Indian story, we have almost 4 different mutual fund schemes which are focusing on ESG category, and one of them is Axis Mutual Fund, and we have somebody who is with us today called Shreyash Devalkar, who has been managing uh, schemes at Axis Mutual Fund. And Shreyas is a senior fund manager at Axis AMC. His education, he is a bachelor in chemical engineering. He's a master in management studies from Jamnalal Bajaj. He has almost 16-year experience in capital market. And prior to this, he has worked in BNP Paribas AMC, as well as for almost 5 years, worked with IDFC Mutual Fund before that. Currently, he manages Axis Blue Chip, Axis Mid Cap, and Axis Multi Cap Fund in the Axis Mutual Fund, and he manages asset more than 25,000 crores. So welcome Shreyas for being with us, and I will leave the floor now open for you for this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Uh, Good evening, everyone, and wish you very happy and safe festive season ahead. To begin with, on ESG, uh, as he has explained, what is it about ESG, and rightly it has been highlighted that ESG is actually about knowing why some companies are trading at higher P multiple and why some are trading lower P multiple. So we always have been wondering why some companies are trading at higher P multiple. and we try to find out then the others are having value, so should we shift to them? But some of this differentiation is explained by this ESG. Uh, so this ESG presentation which we have made is actually we are just trying to find out why some companies are trading at higher multiple, and that this ESG multiple ESG thing highlights in this presentation. So we can just shift to first slide. Please.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So when you look at this slide, what you observe is there is a left hand side which is inputs and there is a right hand side which is output. So how company make money rather than just looking at the outcome. So I'll just give you example. So when we say governance, corporate governance, so out of E, S, and G, market has its own intelligence about G, that is governance. So you will always observe that companies with best of the corporate governance practices always get high multiple, and the worst would get a lower PE multiple for the similar growth. But when it comes to corporate governance, it should not be just a qualitative thing, and that's where when we talk about corporate governance, it has to have a higher free cash flow to PAT, higher ROE in that industry, and those things matter. So that's where when you look at this slide, what this slide tries to highlight to you is historically market focused on the outcome, high ROE companies, high free cash flow companies. But now with this ESG framework, we are trying to realize what is the right hand side. The right hand side is also important, and the left hand side is also important. So how the companies are run, how they are actually the business model and strategy is there, and moving from just financial investment to understanding the company and how the company is being run over a longer term basis. So just instead of trying to focus on the short term factors like growth, ROE, free cash flows, you just try to understand the long term sustainability of those by finding out how these companies are run, what is the strategy, and what are the assets they own, which creates a cash flow for you, and whether those assets are going to be sustainable over a longer period of time. Next slide, please. Okay. So, what are the pillars of ESG? So, as it was explained, I'm just trying to delve more into the details of that. So, if you look at environment, now in environment there is a climate change. So, because of the climate change, already you must have heard that there are various talks about reducing carbon emission, product carbon footprint, and energy efficiency. So, there are companies like LED lights are better energy efficient than earlier. Always you must be hearing that every electrical equipment we buy that has a better EE standard or energy efficiency standard compared to the earlier electrical equipment what we used to buy. Again, to take a much broader scenario in this, you take the case of IC engine, that is internal combustion engine versus EV, that is electrical vehicle. So again, the climate change driving all this. Natural resource use, so water, biodiversity, and land use, and raw material sourcing. So this matters more for the industries which consume lot of natural resources, which may include water, which may include some minerals, which may include oil. And while using those natural resources, whether they are doing it on more sustainable basis or not, that matters. Then waste management, wherein the toxic and packaging material waste are being generated. So really, you must have heard that even Indian government tried to talk about whether how to dispose of the plastic material which is being generated by FMCG industry, even the milk industry. So, but then there are no practical solutions. So that's where in some of the cases the companies can do something about it. In some cases, the citizens need to do their own. They need to use their own discretion while using some of these packaging products and environmental opportunities. So then it throws open some opportunities in renewable energy, green building, and clean technology. So this is most broadly about the environmental, and that's where when we look at environmental broadly, what we understand is the companies which are in the services sector, companies which are in FMCG, client facing, these companies would, software services, banking, financial services, these companies would stand out on e-part, because there is in their product and services, whatever they do, there is nothing, all these things are not a concern. And that's where one of the reasons why in India this sector has one of the highest market cap, and even globally, when you look at even Nasdaq, or even look at S&P. In S&P, 25-26% are the FANG stocks. So this is one of the reasons. I'm not saying this is the only reason, but this is one of the reasons, because as you was highlighting that the money is flowing, a lot of money is flowing into the ESG mandates, and these companies get more and more market share in the indices, and that's where their weightages are increasing. And that's where so that is, it is not a surprise that financial services, tech industry, these are a big part of any indices you take. The second part is social. In social, it is about human capital. So it's labor management, how you treat net your employees, your supply chain, whether there are any controversies in that. I think recently you must have heard some issues around how the employees are being treated by some textile companies. There are some issues which also includes during this COVID scenario, how people are treating their employees. And that's where the human capital comes into picture. Then when it comes to product safety, whether the products which companies are making, whether they are leaving environmental impact, whether they are chemically safe, whether the food product, if they are making, earlier also you must have heard that in couple of cases in India, in the food industry itself, there were some things became viral that companies are using some material which are not good for people. Again, you can just keep aside whether it was right or wrong, what was the output. But point is, irrespective of what it is right or wrong, even such things or such doubts which if get created in the mind of consumers, it can actually affect the sales of those companies and the long-term prospect of those companies. And that's where this social impact matters. And then there is a social opportunity in nutrition and health, and access to communication, health and finance. And that's where the social angle comes into the picture. When it's to the governance, the corporate governance as a is a hygiene factor, practices and disclosures, so how the company give, and market being most of the companies being traded for years together. Market has its own mind on this, and that's where you will notice the differences in the in PE multiple of some companies in this case. Business ethics, as far as it is concerned, whether it is a corruption is involved in the business, or any ethical fraud or fraud is involved, anti-competitive practices. So you must have heard that in some industries, that price rigging or price increase at the same time, and that's where competition of Commission of India would have intervened in those. So these are the practices one need to watch out for. And then the government and public policy, so financial system instability, whether the companies are capable of withstanding that. So these are the things which are which matter under the ESG. We can go to the next slide.
Shreyas, I have before
Yeah.
we move to the next slide, I thought let me ask you a couple of things which will help everyone.
Sure. Yeah, it's better to keep it interactive rather than I just
Right.
rather than.
So it seems like it's very difficult to quantify all these things. So people may talk about we follow all environmental norms, but to the outside world, it is very difficult. How do we quantify these things? Is there a matrix available which ensures that all these things are quantified and companies are rated based on that? How do we do that?
Right. So as I said, out of ESG, market has been watching G part for years now, especially for the companies which are listed for decades together. And you're rightly highlighting the problem for the market is understanding the E part, especially because even the S part is visible to everyone. The E part is where the expertise is required. And that's where first it starts with the segregation among sectors. And that's where what I highlighted was some of the sectors, like service sector, there the E part is anyway not a issue, and that's where market anyway flock to that, and that's where those companies are getting higher deals. Then the challenge what you are highlighting comes into the picture to identify companies within that which are doing well. So like if you take cement sector or steel sector or mining sector, then in that how do you differentiate one among others? So when we rate the company, so there are all the companies or AMCs will be having their proprietary model operating on the ESG parameters. So we also do have, and as some of us, as you were highlighting, we are having ESG fund and we are having Schroders as a partner. So there are global standards what they use. And so by definition, when it comes company service sector, then suddenly its rating on the E parameter goes up. Now, if you, so out of say 1 to 5, 5 is the best, and say financial services get 5 or IT services get 5, then in that case, a cement company by inherently would get 3, and a mining company would inherently get 2. Now, when they get 3, then you have to differentiate among those, the best one and the worst one. And there comes a trick that how will you find out? In that such cases, what we do is obviously you don't have data, so you approach company with your questionnaire and trying to ask as much data as possible quantitatively. But the issue to begin with, I think this process will get streamlined, is to get a coherent data and comparable data from various companies, which can really help you in rating in more objectively. However, the attempts are being made from our side also to ask for right data, but then you may or may not get in a similar manner so that you can compare one company versus other. But we try to do it as objectively as possible by rating companies based on the data which we ask from them and the data which they give to us. Simultaneously, some of the agencies, they also tried or there are some independent companies who are trying to give the ESG report card of the company. But in such cases, it is always better to do it internally and also compare it to the external. It is like rating agency, right? So any bank would rate any company AAA or AA based on their internal metrics, as well as they use the external agencies like ICRA and CARE for their rating. So in this case also, I think slowly the industry will evolve in such a manner. Initially, we are using internally, probably some agencies come also give external data, and then overall it will progress in that manner.
Sure. Yes, Shreyas. You can continue, Shreyas. No problem.
Sure. Yeah. So we'll shift to the next slide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually more of pictorial version of it. What happens when we don't follow ESG? So it have a climate impact, and so classic example here would be EV. So actually, if you look at earlier, it was only IC engine based on diesel. Then there was a move towards petrol as a cleaner fuel. Then there was move towards CNG, then EV. So you just understand how globally the companies in the IC sector got derated and the companies in EV sector got re-rated. So climate change is one of the main factors for that, right? Then sustainable farming and mining. Then privacy and data security is also important in today's world when the services sector is there, and the greater regulatory scrutiny. So that's where the G part of the comes to the picture. So we'll go to the next slide.
Yes.
So big ESG practices increase business risk for everyone, and ESG factors and the impact on risk you want to assess. Then normally what happens is when it comes to the business practices, it's not just nice to do things. So we always believe that ESG is just nice to do. So it used to be nice to do, but now with the advent of technology, with the advent of social media, information transmission so fast, one cannot hide their ESG related progresses or problems. one problem in some food company, it comes to the WhatsApp next day and it spreads. So it has a real damage on the product. One problem on the governance, next day morning you will have in your WhatsApp the analysis of that. And so the point is, today in today's world, it's it's not nice thing to follow, but it is essential to follow. There is a lot of transparency in the system. So it is not just, as I said, it's not just nice thing, as if you don't do it, then it increases the risk. It increases the risk for the stock prices, and such stocks then become very volatile. So it won't affect. So doing such things may not affect quarterly results for any company, but it affects long term. So companies start if they don't do it, so then the company slowly starts trading at discount, and some companies start trading at premium to others. And that's how, though there is no near-term earning impact, but then because of this premium and discount, stock price movement, and that's where you will notice that now slowly tobacco industry has got derated worldwide. IC engines and has got derated worldwide. So anyway, try to look at as a quality parameter, but its are really getting serious when it comes to stock selection and stock performance. So actually, e-meter is nowadays, actually it is no more a liberty only for ESG funds, and the rest of the funds can say that, okay, I don't care. The issue is that actually the rest of the industry and the rest of the funds also so
Sorry, I think there is some audio issue. Shreyas? Yeah, Shreyas?
hello,
Yes, yeah, we can hear you, Shreyas. You can
am
continue.
I audible? Yeah, I think
Yes.
it's why I got disconnected probably.
Yes.
Am I audible now?
Yes, Shreyas. Shreyas, you can be a little more loud. I think your voice
Yeah.
is breaking in.
So okay, so what I was talking about. Okay. Sure. So what I was highlighting is already the companies are getting rated on this, and this is no more a nice to do things even for the fund manager, for the other funds as well. So at Axis we have ESG fund and other funds also, but I cannot say that in other funds I don't want to follow ESG, and in the ESG fund only we will follow ESG. It is not the case, because you know that when I'm choosing any stock in other funds as well, there also if I don't if I try to sacrifice on ESG part, anyway, in Axis we don't sacrifice on G part nor S part. But in E part, if you want to sacrifice more and if you want to allocate very high exposure to some of the sectors which are probably good, but then not standing on the E part or S part, then those funds are going to underperform. And that's where even the regular funds, non-ESG funds, also need to take care of it. And that's where fund managers of all the funds actually are getting sensitive about it.
Shreyas, I think we have couple of attendees who,
yeah,
we have couple of attendees who have very specific questions to the
sure.
slide. So we have Mr. Madhusudan who wants to ask you a question. Mr. Madhu, you can ask your question, please.
Yeah, Shreyas, hi.
Hello.
Good evening. I'm Madhu from Bangalore. So it's very interesting that you articulating the ESG importance of P multiples. But there are minimum governance, there is a corporate governance, CSR, some of the environmental. So every company does it. It's difficult to differentiate. And as you rightly said, some of the service industries like you have BFSI and all service industries, they don't have any product related issues. So it's service. So to that extent, they stand little advantage compared to a tobacco, mining or a manufacturing. So how is it possible to unify, measure them uniformly and then allocate a particular weightage so that the price earning multiple will go in one case, does not go in other? For example, you really touched that. I'm really happy to say that tobacco, ITC does a lot of this. So their share price is doing well, probably. But still, when you take ESG and then say tobacco, it doesn't go together. So it's very conflicting and difficult, right?
Right. So many companies whose business model inherently involves some issues on E and H part. So inherently, it has, they can't do anything about it, right? The tobacco industry can't do anything about it, or that for that matter, metal mining industry can't do anything about it. Cement industry. So obviously, they are going to consume water. They are going to to mine the things, then it affects environment. Power generation industry. So the coal-based power generation, and that's where you will notice that coal-based power generation plants are derated totally compared to the renewable energy power generation. Now, in this case, what market or what the capital allocator are telling is it is about the market plays the role of capital allocation. So what you are talking about is what happens to the existing industry. The issue here is what capital allocators as a market, what it is doing is as when ESG was just nice thing to do. At that time, probably the industry never moved, right? But then when it starts reflected in their multiples, then they started moving. In some cases they started diversifying away. In some cases they started taking more caution on that. So this probably regulator plays when it comes to the E and S. But then whether it is efficient. So when it comes to the coal-based power plant, so the individual coal-based power plant must be satisfying all the requirement of the pollution control board of that state or that location, right? So they are right in their own sense, and they are doing extremely right in what they should. So there is no problem in it. But when it comes to the capital market's role as a incremental capital allocator, what capital market is doing by derating it and by re-rating some companies which are doing sustainable thing like renewable energy or by wind energy or solar energy, that's where the incremental capital get allocated more to those, and the capital don't get allocated to a coal-based power plant. And that's where you may be aware that in Europe already the coal-based power plants are actually close to 10-15%, if I'm not wrong. In US also, incrementally there are no coal-based power plants. So why it has happened? Because of this process which capital market also has participated. It's not that only capital market. I'm just saying it is also playing its role in that process. That incremental capital allocation is to environmentally sustainable.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Madhusudan. Thank you, Mr. Madhusudan. Yes, you can continue. You can continue.
Sure. Yeah. So we can go to the next slide.
Yes. Anybody who has any question, please put it in the chat box and we will try to take those questions. Thank you.
Right. I would also appreciate this if you can ask directly then and there. Otherwise, it will be too monotonous and monologue for all of us.
Yes.
So ESG. So now, if you go to the next slide, so we are on there, and that's where this what it shows that Google searches on ESG and investor and interest over time, what people have done. So these are just the indicators. There is nothing scientific about it, but what it supports is the support from business, investor, and regulator all. So till now on the ESG, the regulators are working, have worked, right? The businesses are working, but then when investor also force them from our side, the market also force them on our side as a capital allocator, then that process of ESG and doing environmentally sustainable thing also accelerates, right? Because it is like a reward for someone who is doing environmentally sustainable increment. Now, and that's where you will notice that the surface. And now the second, the right-hand side also shows you the growth of ESG incorporation by money manager. And this part actually was highlighting earlier in his opening speech. And here actually we can see the numbers. And the money and the numbers is just has a shot up. So in 2018, around 11,600 billion corpus went to the ESG mandate, and these things drive the re-rating or de-rating. And one may ask the question whether it is right. But I just told you, in my opinion, why it is right, the re-rating, de-rating is because of this reason. Because the capital market also as a capital allocator forces industries to, along with the regulator, to move in a more sustainable manner. Next slide, please.
Sure. Shreyas,
So
one more point I wanted to highlight. I think globally the performance of ESG company compared to the S&P 500 has been 200 basis point more. It has given 2% more returns. That's what I have read somewhere. Do you see this happening?
There is a reason for that, and that's what I just highlighted earlier, that by default, a tech company and the financial services would get higher ranking, and on ESG front. And as you are aware, that tech has done extremely well globally, and that's where. So whether entirely you will attribute to it, no, probably tech companies also had various other tailwinds behind them, and that's where they are doing well. Like cloud, like Amazon doing well for different reasons. Twitter must be doing well for different reasons. From in China, their Tencent and Alibaba doing well for different reasons. But the underlying theme one can drive is more and more money is being driven on this mandate, and that's where if earlier X money would have gone to the non ESG compliant companies, today probably X by 10 money is going there, and that is accelerating the process. So entirely one cannot say that 2% return is entirely attributable to ESG, but I would say, I'm just throwing some rough number, there is no scientific reasoning behind it, but I would say 25% of that 2% you can attribute to ESG, and 75% to anyway those industries doing well.
All right. Thank you, Shreyas.
So this will not go in detail, but this is just gives you pictorial reasons for why one should be following and why world is following it. We'll go to the next slide. The ESG is affecting Indian companies. Now, if you look at this, then it also changes health and lifestyle. Now, if you notice that consumer preferences switching to Ayurvedic. So actually in India, it is Ayurvedic herbal, but globally what they call it as the shift towards natural. And this shift toward natural is again coming back to the ESG. So now everyone talk about non-antibiotic food or the food, animal food from the animals which are not fed antibiotics. Then it is about organic farming. It is about using products which are having less chemicals. Now, why this is happening? It is more about ESG, and that's where you have seen that the companies which are in these, and actually even the traditional companies are talking more and more about naturals. If you take the second part, actually we just highlighted that social unrest. So if you don't take, so already worldwide, it is not only in India, worldwide there is always already a divide in the wealth creation, and that gap is widening. And if you don't do anything about it, then obviously it is going to create unrest and it is already creating unrest in various parts of the world, so including India. And that is where, to bridge this gap, this social angle is very much important. So that's where we said that it is not just nice thing to do. If you don't do it, anyway, your business is not going to be sustainable in that country. And that is where these things are important. So some of the companies always talk about purpose-based. So you must have heard this word from some of the FMCG companies. They always talk about purpose, what purpose you are solving. So if you are making, say, detergents, then whether your detergents are using less water than earlier, then yes, then you are serving some purpose. If it is, so you should be developing your product. It should not be that, yes, my brand is good, I can get 50% plus gross margin, probably for 30% EBITDA margin, and just be happy about it. They should be reinvesting to actually serve some purpose for the society, so that their products become sustainable and remain sustainable for a longer period of time. And on the government part also, that's where you must have seen the schemes like affordable housing, financial inclusion. So everyone is playing their role. It is not only about government. So earlier it was only thought about that government only should do, but then everyone should do. Otherwise, your businesses will not sustain in that part of the world. So we'll just shift to the next slide, please.
Sure.
This is about more about the G part of it. So transparency, whistleblower. You must have seen that one whistleblower incident, and this is very good. So all these things, one whistleblower incident actually created a lot of volatility in one of the stock last year, last year. So there you must have seen that it's good because it created a problem, but then the problem got resolved. And then if such policies are not there, such transparent policies are not there in the company, then in that case, the problem will be just hidden, and it will be under carpet for a long period of time. And then only when it blows out of the proportion, the way it happened in case of Satyam, and then the world knows. So these policies which companies are implementing, and actually if it is working, then as an investor we should be happy that yes, this policy is working in this company. That means actually this company has really good policies to follow, and those things actually gives you comfort and confidence about it. And that's where the regulatory scrutiny and whistleblower policy and transparency by and multiple auditor checks. And that's where you must have seen recently that everyone should be voting objectively. Then there are independent agencies. Again, in this voting thing, there are some independent agencies which has come up. They guide investors on how to vote and what are the parameters to look at, and they recommend that as per their opinion whether you should be voting for or against a particular resolution the company is undertaking. And so earlier, probably people never thought in too much detail, but then nowadays, all the institutional investors are thinking about it and playing an more active role than earlier in the voting for a company.
Shreyas, again, one question while I was going
Sure.
through this whistleblower thing. Can't these be used to manipulate things? There could be a lot of places where this could be very easily manipulated. Whistleblowers can be created, right? And
Sure.
we have seen in last year one FMCG company where there was this complaint around the product quality and all those issues were, and the stock prices have taken the beating, but ultimately it got the clearance after some
True.
point of time. So I think it is very relative, right? Some country may have some rules, some country may have another rule. Some may try to do this to rig the stock price. So as a fund manager, I know it's very difficult to identify, but how would you look at it? Because these whistleblower things can be manipulated. Many times this can be planted.
True. You're perfectly the good observation, and as you're highlighting, we have seen couple of cases, not only one of that. When you speak to companies, they say that mostly they get hundreds of whistleblower complaints internally. It's not only one or two; they get many of them. Then some of them are smaller ones which can be taken care of at the employee level. And most of these the time this whistleblower can be also, as you're highlighting, someone is playing around just because he's not happy with his company superior or whatever it may be the reason. And then you just try to let's not talk about whether we want to manipulate stock price or not. That is a totally different issue altogether. There can be simpler issues also, that you're not happy with your superiors, you're not happy with your company, and then you just try to create something, and then you submit such a report to the internal auditor. And every company has their ESG, their whistleblower policy, so you have to submit it to them. So then the companies normally assess it. In their opinion, if they find something, they report to the exchanges. If they don't find, then they don't report. But then when it comes out to the market, by whatever means it comes out, then and that is the reason why when we choose a company, most of the time you end up choosing companies which have proven good practices for years together, and at least in companies where you are not heard anything for years together, and such companies you tend to choose or allocate money more than the newer ones. And even if it is newer one to the market, but it may be listed, or it may be existing for a longer period of time, and then you take the view from the competitors, you talk to their vendors, competitor employees, and you take a view from that, and then accordingly one time to so first level of filtering is try to avoid somewhere you think there can be issue. That is the first level. And the second, by choosing, and that's where these policies of looking at board, having many independent director, rotation of independent director, all those helps by looking at by those policies. And even after that, if something happens, then obviously taking opinion from various stakeholders also helps in this.
So, but it is definitely very difficult thing, right? Very, very relative thing to value any what parameter.
Yeah. So it is very related. And that's why I said that the question was also there, how you rate these companies on that. And then it becomes very, very objective. And it becomes very difficult to remain objective because of various reasons. And that's where the way in case of voting, independent third-party companies have come up. I'm sure for this rating also there will some independent third parties will come.
Correct. Sure. Yes.
So actually, you also talked about the ESG and COVID and what the companies did in and what they do during this time period. So we must have heard many things during this COVID time. What some of the companies did. Some companies provided essential goods, and they have taken efforts to keep their operations on. Some companies provided their sales force with insurance cover. Some companies actually gave those who get COVID. Some companies gave additional money to them. So many companies took various measures in this crisis, and it is not only this crisis. Now, if you take even not only about COVID, if you take even Ireland FSL crisis, GST implementation. So these are the external environmental changes, right? So during these external environmental changes, the listed company which you are investing may not face any issue, but their vendors will face issues. They may be smaller, they may not be equipped. So most of these companies actually handholded, guided, they provided them with software, integrated their software with theirs, and they tried to take them along. And this is one of the reasons, as and when more regulation comes, the transparent system like GST get implemented, and in such a cases, the bigger and better managed companies benefit versus others. And these are some of the examples we have highlighted that some companies try to do better than others, as per the newspaper reports.
Sure.
Next slide.
Yes.
So it is now about whether the ESG add value to investor, because all we talk about whether it gives you returns or not. And that's where sustainable companies, they run for long term and taking into account their impact on the various stakeholders. They generally give you higher return because of their lower cost of capital, their compounding ability is better than other. Because if there are ESG issues, then because of one issue, like some plant is shut because of its environmental, they are not meeting environmental norms. Suddenly in your compounding story, 2 years are gone or 1 year is gone, right? And that's where the compounding becomes higher for such companies and for shareholders. And that's where they also command the premium valuation. And they have lower volatility, as I said, as you are also highlighted. You also highlighted that when there is a whistleblower, suddenly you will see a volatility. But then if the company itself is good and the whistleblower, then anyway, what can they do beyond the point? And that's where it creates a value for shareholders. Now, if we go to the next slide, in the next slide we try to highlight whether we can quantify, and this is where your question comes from, that 2% higher returns they generated, and where will you attribute to. So in India also we have an index. So if you look at right hand side of this chart, and below there is a table, it shows that from 2011 to 2019 we have a Nifty 100 ESG index in India, and you have a Nifty 50. So there is a difference in these returns of these two indices, 14.5 versus 12.9. Now your question was that whether we can attribute. As I was highlighting, you cannot attribute entirely to this, partly to this, probably 20-25%. because inherently when you follow ESG guidelines, then you will end up having higher exposure to tech, IT, financial services, and those sectors in India did well for various reasons along with its ESG. And that's where, as I said, it may be because of ESG, but ESG has helped you in allocating higher capital. And when you see these results, then obviously for me as a fund manager who is not managing ESG fund, also becomes more lucrative to be with ESG compliant companies, because that gives anyway alpha, right? And that's how then everyone try to be with it. And that's where if you see even each year basis also, it becomes very difficult to find out whether ESG has given or not. Overall, over a longer period of time, it shows it has given. But as I said, it becomes very tricky to attribute, because IT industry or financial services industry might have done well even otherwise. So like post-COVID, financial services underperformed. So post-COVID, probably you will notice that this might not have done well, right? Versus normal Nifty. So this is how one needs to look at it. And
Yes,
the left-hand side, yeah.
Shreyas, for our viewers' information, how much percentage of these companies have services allocation versus manufacturing compared to Nifty? If the ESG index companies versus.
Frankly, if you ask me, Nifty also nowadays is very heavy on services. So you just take it around 34% is financial services, IT is around 18%, 54% is there itself. And then if you talk about telecom services, wherein a part of even Reliance would come, retail industry would come, and suddenly retail is also a services industry. And suddenly you notice that even Nifty non-services component is very less. So in ESG, I have not checked, frankly. I'll come back on exact number, but definitely I would say that it is having higher exposure.
Sure. But does
But
this
we
make
also rate companies for our internally for ESG fund, and that's how we observe that inherently the services and tech companies get higher weightage, higher rating in that.
But does this make this portfolio much more concentrated than diversified? Does it bring into a lot of concentration risk to a specific sector?
Yes, it would give a increase the concentration risk. When it will play out. So, okay, and that is where I would like to highlight one thing, that when you, again, that was a very interesting question, whether you will attribute 2% outperformance or year or so, whatever is outperformance to this. One of the reasons for this outperformance, as I said, why this happened, that why tech and financial services did well, and you even go to the root cause of that. It did well because in India for last 5 years, 10 years, somehow in our GDP, only, so if GDP comprises of services, manufacturing, agri, and various components, then somehow services component did well, and the manufacturing investment component did not do well. And that is the reason why services component even outperformed even more. So that has played role in this. So, and that's where if you are even more concentrated in that, then obviously you would have benefited. Now, just paint a scenario wherein if and as and when and if our investment and manufacturing start doing much better, the way it should do in 2000, somewhere around 2, 3 to 8, 10 period. So in such a period, yes, then probably this kind of strategy will face the issue, especially for the reason which you are highlighting, which is the concentration risk.
Sure. Shreyas, you manage a mid-cap fund also, and there is a specific question from one of the listeners. Is that most of the specialty manufacturing companies in India do badly on pollution management? Can you share one or two example? I know it would be difficult for you to name any company in this industry having done well on ESG parameter and outperform.
At least when it comes to listed companies, if you look at the pollution control boards of India, and especially when it comes to the listed companies, because then they sell chemical, especially the specialty chemical, and not the commodity chemical. So, and rightly you asked the question about specialty chemical. When it comes to specialty chemicals, they end up selling to, and most of the time exporting to. So whichever companies did well are actually also exporters. It is not just a coincidence. And when it comes to exporting specialty, then your clients look for it. And again, it is like your investor is asking you to do it, your client is also asking you to do it. So the client, it is like, you just take a case of say pharmaceutical company. If your plant is US FDA compliant, then they will give you job. Similarly, in case of chemical companies also, if they see your plant is compliant, they will give you job, because for them the issue is, if your vendor is not doing well, and that case you saw in one of the textile recently, that if your vendor is not compliant, then their stock price in their countries will face the issue, and they will have some other issues in their country. So especially since most of these companies are export driven, and they also drive it. And while I said that, it doesn't mean that Indian companies don't do it, and if your Indian client don't look at it, even Indian clients also look at it. And when it comes to the listed space, most of these are organized large players which have done well. And in such cases, I doubt, especially in the specialty chemical industry, wherein your end client is socially responsible as well as you, as a specialty chemical company. So there are multiple pressures on these companies to do it involuntarily, if not voluntarily. And that's where I doubt that there can be few cases which actually I don't know, frankly. If I would have known, I would have highlighted, but frankly, I would not know any example where it would have done. So there are two things in this. One is meeting the regulatory norms. So in the listed space, definitely the companies must be meeting the regulatory norms. When it comes to doing beyond that, now when it comes to chemical, as I said, cement. Now, if you want cement or we don't want cement, if you want cement, or we want power or we don't want power. If you want power, some certain proportion of power has to come from the coal-based power plant. And then whatever pollution happens because of that is the reality, frankly. So in some such things, it can be only done on an incremental basis. So when it happens, the incremental basis, what happens is, so you must have heard about in air condition, we used to use earlier fluorine-based some components, where then they said that no, this chemical is not right to be used. Now you use environmentally friendly gases in that, and that's how even that happens in your agrochemical as well. So whichever agrochemical are polluting internationally, even and Indian governments also follow international as well as local norms. We are also changing the norms in a manner that we are phasing out the chemicals which actually pollute more the sand as well as the land. And in such cases, naturally it is being changed. But until the time this change happens, obviously we have to, it's nice to have a renewable power for everyone tomorrow, but then what happens today, right? So those are the questions to be asked in such debates.
Sure. Should I go to the next slide? Oh, it's done.
Yeah. So sorry, actually, while you were speaking, I was just trying to search for this ESG index component where I can get it, but I could not get it quickly. So actually, we will try to, then we'll go to the next.
Great. So Shreyas, I think we have some more questions coming in. So one question, do you insist on GRI standard disclosure from investee companies? Do you pass on some benefits to ESG rated entities?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
So I think, do your fund insist on GRI standard disclosures from the investee companies? And do you pass on some benefit to the ESG rated entities?
So see, we obviously we asked in a sense whatever the regulatory requirement we ask for, and especially for the ESG fund, we have our internal rating, so we definitely ask for whatever information, and whoever gives it obviously get a benefit in rating when it comes to that.
Sure. So now I want to ask you some question, Shreyas, on your investing style. And I think I'm sure many of us are interested in knowing about your story about investing. How did you started, and what have been, I'm sure you have a career of almost 16 years, 17 years now, post your MBA. So how has been your journey being with managing money? Maybe you can share your ups and downs. How did you learn the tricks of managing money? That will be something very interesting for all of us to know. Equity
Yeah.
investing, something on the equity investing journey of yours.
Okay. So yeah, it has not been so long or so illustrious to give you too much insight, but I'll just tell you my learning of investing. Generally, some rule of thumb which helped a lot that I would like to highlight, and some of them are very very obvious. Actually, there is no rocket science, and they are given by Peter Lynch in his book, and it's very old book, and the same thing, like what you observe around, what you observe doing good in the market, what you observe we were in the businesses around as a consumer, not as an investor. That actually has helped you to gain a lot of wealth. One of the reasons for that being India somehow always as an investment story has been mostly about consumption and less about the infrastructure investment, capital goods, or any other sector. Probably IT is the only, and pharma is the only other sector. I'm talking about export pharma. So domestic pharma is also about consumption. So if you just keep your eyes and ear open, watch out for companies who are doing well. You can observe them as a good company who you think. So probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago, if you are one of the earlier ones who are adopting to pizza eating culture and you just observe what is happening around, you get your idea. And I am broadly that has actually helped. It always appears that you may be late, you may not be late, but always it is about incrementally whether your company is gaining market share or not, what is happening to competition, what is happening to industry dynamics. So first is about that, and that's where always the focus has been on the B2C companies rather than the B2B companies. And B2C companies has helped a lot, because in B2B companies, by keeping your eyes and ear open as a consumer doesn't help. There you need that extra understanding. And just I think my I just hold on.
I think you can very well, everyone can ask more questions here if anyone has.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, my Bluetooth, the battery got exhausted. So
No problem,
yeah.
Shreyas.
So yeah, so that always helps, as I said. So as an investor, retail investor, as an institutional investor, as the B2C companies, that's where always help in investing. And again, when it comes to B2C company, then generally all these things, all the ESG gets taken care of. Your product is scrutinized by consumers, which you can see by yourself, your family, colleague. Now with the advent of social media, you can take read opinion about anyone in the world on that product, and which one is winning, which one is not winning, and that becomes analysis even simpler.
Sure. So anything you want to share about your journey, any investing things you have learned by I'm sure we all have made a lot of errors while making
Right.
investments also. So anything which you have learned and which you want to share with all of us should be avoided, maybe based on your journey.
My opinion, the businesses which are self-sustaining when it comes to the capital and when it comes to growth, the businesses which can grow without raising lot of capital, the businesses which can grow without coming to market many times. Exception is financial services. Obviously, the raw material is the capital. Such businesses has always created more wealth than the businesses that need to come to the capital market repeatedly to raise capital for growth. And so the correlate to that, the error is then you when you get into the companies where the leverage is very high, and that errors would have happened especially during the infrastructure cycle. So then you end up having companies which are very high debt in nature, and you believe that yes, after 5 years the free cash flow will come, but then it never came. So when you stick to the companies which don't need to come to the market for repeatedly for capital, either by way of debt and equity, then such businesses gives you better compounding over longer period of time.
Sure. And Shreyas, I have observed in many of your funds, you seem like a big fan of concentration. I think compared to the peer group large cap funds, I have seen your funds have much more concentration. So anything you want to share on this bit, concentration versus diversification?
Okay. So if you ask, so I've been at least as a fund manager managing funds since 2011-12 broadly. Earlier, I never used to have that kind of concentration, and I was not. And again, as I'm saying, I don't have any view on this whether concentration is right or not right. I don't have any view. I'm just telling my concentration today is outcome of something, and I will be more than happy to diversify it away. So when I'm saying, I just explain why I'm saying that. As I said earlier, our GDP comprise of what? Consumption, investment, net exports. If the period is like 2002 to 2010, when your consumption did well, investment did well, exports did well, you are more than happy to diversify and have exposure across the board. Now, since last 10 years, what we are observing is, and more so in last 5 years, only the economy is getting heterogeneous. It is not homogeneous. So in that case, only consumption is doing well, a part of export doing well. So suddenly your anyway investment sets come down. In that also because of various crises. Normally what happens is crisis leads to consolidation on ground of the industries. It can be COVID, it can be Island FS, it can be that Nirav Modi led episode which happened because of with the PSUs. Before that, there was GST is not a crisis, but it is a disruption, demonetization, twin deficit problem. So in last 10 years, there has been multiple such events. And when such event happen, eventually, even this COVID also you're noticing that the big gets bigger, organized gets more, get to grow more, and unorganized get to grow less. So in that scenario, anyway, your number of choices come down. And so it has been outcome of both these. So as and when it reverses, I will be more than happy to diversify.
So you are saying it is not by design. It is
No,
happening because of there are less opportunities available in the market.
exact. That is yes. So as of now, I observed that, and that is where it is.
But Shayans, again, this is again since you mentioned the concentration thing, you have an option to invest outside India also, and you have funds where you have exposure of 30% of the portfolio can be invested outside India.
True.
What are your views on that part? Do you think it's a proposition one as an investor one should look at?
Definitely, there are multiple reasons for that. So, as an Indian investor, we don't diversify away. So, when we look at equity investing, we normally talk about large cap, mid cap, small cap, right? While if you look at, so recently we had a launch of even Axis global fund. That is a fund of fund structure we had, wherein our partner Schroders have a global fund. We propose to invest in that one. The point is there in that launch, what we highlighted was globally, US citizens diversify their wealth. Japanese citizens diversify their wealth. Again, you can say that Japan is not growing, so they have to. European citizens diversify their wealth. So as the Indian citizens, we are having probably 99.9% or 99.8% in India. So just diversification, just based on large, mid, and small, or some sectoral fund, that may or may not help. It is better to diversify on countries as well. One of the reasons why earlier we thought that that yes, India is fastest growing country. So then why you need to? Then that question comes. We are fastest growing country even today. When you see GDP growth, probably COVID would have distorted. But even before that, when world was slowing down, we were still relatively growing faster. So then why do you need to invest abroad? But the point is, when you are doing there, it is not that you are investing in certain cases few economies. You are actually investing in companies which are growing globally, right? They are growing faster than some of our companies also, and that is the reason why one should consider. So if you are having zero, then whether that number is 5% of net portfolio or 10% of portfolio, as an individual investor, is your call to be taken. But yes, it has to be there in your portfolio, and that is where we believe that, and that's where, if you notice, our last fund launch was on that fund of fund. Before that, our ESG fund actually, we invest up to 30% in companies outside India. In our large and mid cap category fund, which is Axis Growth Opportunities Fund, there we have up to 30% exposure to foreign entities. So here the trick is, what is your expertise to invest in that, right? That is where the trick is, that as a fund house, what is your expertise to invest in that? Because sitting here, whether you are just getting overwhelmed by the FANG stock and investing in them, or you are really understanding them, that is the bigger question. And in that case, at least in our case, we have Schroders as our partner, as some of you may be aware, and we are using their help to do it in the funds which are mandated to invest, or wherein we have taken mandate to invest abroad.
Sure. So coming next question is, I think COVID has brought in, I'm sure the last 6 months before, how you would look at companies and investing, and how you are investing now, it is very different shares, right? I think there is a lot of change in the way we look at companies now. So can you share with our investors some specific sectors which you feel investors should look at, some specific themes one should align with in coming 3 years, 5-year investing? Anything specific you want to share with us?
So, see, frankly, COVID, what it does is, it has just, so our philosophy, or my way of doing, our house's way of doing, has been about quality and growth. So quality, what we have talked about in ESG, and then it comes to growth. So the quality, whether COVID changes quality, the answer is, so it remains same on that front. When it comes to growth, yes, COVID has changed growth pecking order. What it has changed is, 1 year ago, 6 months ago, before COVID, 8 months ago, before COVID, if you would have asked me, I would have said that the fastest growing sectors in India is retail credit growth, right? Because industry level, it is growing at 13%. Individual companies are growing at 15%, 20%, 25%. In case of, so that has to be the highest proportion of your investment. That is the best investment to do. And that's where we had always highest exposure to that. Retail industry, again, highest exposure, because it is the fastest growing industry in India. Now, what COVID did is, because of social distancing and because of stress in the system, suddenly the growth in these two segments, it just comes down, and now it becomes last when it comes to pecking order. And then you want to flock to the companies wherever the relatively growth is high. And that is one of the reasons why IT outperformed. Because IT earlier also used to grow at 8%. Now also they're growing at broadly at 10%. There is not much difference. Only thing is, they have shown resilience to this COVID, while the sectors like like retail credit growth and retail industry could not show resilience. There the growth has come down. So, but then whether IT industry's growth is superior compared to pre-COVID, no. But still the stocks are up than the pre-COVID level because as they got re-rated. So post-COVID scenario is this change in this scenario. I don't think one should just take this scenario as a long-term and invest based on that because there can be and there is some possibility because entire world is searching for some vaccine, right? So there is a possibility of vaccine. There is a possibility of herd immunity. Again, looking at the second lockdowns in the Western countries, probably that possibility is questionable today. But if the vaccine comes, then suddenly the things again change. So because of this post-COVID world has created a lot of nuances. Now you focus on near term till the vaccine comes, or you assume that these things last for 2 years, 3 years, the social distancing requirement lasts for 2 years, 3 years, and then invest based on that. And that is the real tricky question here. And the answer to which suddenly swings your sector selection from one end to other. Already market has shown you that which are the sector which are good in this current post-COVID world, which is already reflected in the outperformance of those stocks. So I don't think there is a rocket science today. That guess would have been more intellectual probably in April when it market was just going up. Today it is already market has shown that IT has done well, pharma has done well, some of other segments where the growth is better has done well, which are less affected by social distancing has done well. But now the swing will come more because of this.
So, Shreyas, again, since you mentioned sectors, how would you look at banking? I think banking has the biggest proportion in Nifty, and this sector, everybody, a lot of analysts are showing concern that NPAs will rise. How would you play this sector at this point of time?
Oh, and that is where it is reflected, right? YTD, if you look at the performances, one can doubt whether the market should be closer to 12,000 or not, right? But the relatively market has done what is right. Relatively, IT has done extraordinary returns, pharma has done, and financial services underperform. And that's the trick that's what I'm talking about, right? Suddenly the company NBFC which was growing at 20 to 30% is suddenly growing at 5%. Talking about 5% to 10%, 7% growth by fourth quarter. Suddenly the growth parameters have changed, and that's where this sector becomes tricky in that sense. But the way I would approach this is as any other industry, whenever the industry through goes through crisis, generally it consolidates and the winners emerge. So one should try to be with the consolidator, those who can withstand this crisis and are able to grow after this crisis even faster. So the example probably you just see when this banking and financial crisis, not only COVID, you just see banking and financial has seen multiple crises in that sense. So starting from Demon, then GST implementation, and then after that again Nirav Modi led episode, and then IL&FS. There were four crises or disruptions. One can call one of the crises one can be called disruption. And look at the number of stocks which in the banking and financial services which market talked about. Probably you talked about Forex stocks pre IL&FS. Post IL&FS, suddenly the number of stocks which the market talked about suddenly fell to 1/3. And but whether those 1/3 gave you return, yes, those 1/3 actually gave you return. They actually performed extremely well after the IL&FS crisis, and they actually touched new highs. So one need to watch out for this process and try to be with those. That is the way one should look at financial services.
So we had our last master class on banking and financial services because this sector has underperformed, and the speakers have highlighted that post this crisis period, the ROEs of the strong banking or financial companies actually expand due to the lower cost of capital, and there is a lot of consolidation in the industry. Would you agree to that point?
Yeah, that's what I was highlighting. So instead of talking about ROE, I just talked about that they anyway benefit because the depositors flock to them. Depositors flock to them during the crisis, so their cost of capital come down. Or if they're NBFC, then market stop giving money to the NBFCs where they find concern, while those who where the concern is not, they end up getting in money. So then their cost of capital drop versus their peer. And now, whenever this economy or the retail credit growth will start picking up, they will be in the better position to grow, and that's where their numbers would look at. Today, ROEs are more depressed because of the provisions which all the bank and NBFCs are undertaking for the COVID. So today, market is concerned about how long this crisis will last, or more than crisis, how long the social distancing will last, because the crux of the problem is social distancing, because of which you cannot go to the mall, because of which you cannot do travel, tourism, hotels, and those industries are in trouble. Now, if these things last for long, then more and more trouble will actually come out. If these things end in 3 to 6 months, then probably you are good to go and buy this sector more and more.
So you are actually bullish on this space, and this offers a lot of
selectively in the stock. Yeah, selectively in this stocks in this sector.
All right. And I think my last question, Shreyas, and this is to a large cap fund manager, because again, like a ESG concept, globally, we are seeing ETFs, exchange traded funds are finding a lot of value globally. So and I think I am sure you as a large cap fund manager must be observing that, is it becoming difficult to outperform the index? And what are your views for investors on that?
So first of all, one need to, there are two. So when some asks question, then the question is from 2-3 angle. So you asked me one angle, but there are 2-3 angles, and that's where I just wanted to give all encompassing answer to this. So one angle is whether one should be with large cap, mid and small, because they are beating while large cap as a category may not be doing well versus single. There, always the answer is look at absolute return, don't go by the whether you are beating benchmark or not, right? So you look at 3-year, 5-year, 10-year return. 1 year may be different, but 3-year, 5-year, 10-year return. Then just look at which category has outperformed. So that's where the large cap versus mid and small comes into picture. Now, when you then select a large, in that case, I would say that yes, as an investor, so if I am a retail investor, if I'm as an individual investor, as an individual investor, what we do normally is I'll come to your specific question, but I'm just first talking about the practical issues of this. You anyway, as a retail investor, don't buy one large cap fund. You have 2-3 large cap funds or 4-5 based on individual choices. Whether one of them can be ETF, yes, it can be. And then what you do, you then keep on allocating to the ones which are doing well. That can be passive or that can be active. Whoever is the best, that's how you generally keep on building your portfolio, right? Who is consistently doing good returns. Now, from the fund manager point of view, that how we are, whether these problems are structural in nature or more it is a passing phase for everyone. My opinion here is coming back to the comments what I made earlier. The comments what I made earlier were the economy is narrow, heterogeneous. So what is happening is every year you ask anyone what is the next year's Nifty growth rate, everyone will answer you 20%, and the outcome would have been 0%, 5%, minus, right? And then still some companies created wealth just because there is a market share gain. Now, in this scenario, when the economy is relatively narrower and few stocks doing well, such a environment becomes tricky, because when as a fund manager, when your probability of stocks going up is high, so in the market out of say 100 stocks, if 40 are relatively giving you 20% return, then as a fund manager, my probability to choose 10-15 of those 40 and make them 40% of my fund and outperforming benchmark, that probability is very high. What is happening is that because of this polarization in economy, heterogeneous economy, only few stocks are doing well. So now when only 10 or 12 or 15 are going to do well, then the probability of choosing dramatically drops. And that's where in some year you may choose that, but in other year you may not choose that. But if only 10, 15 are going to do well, then there is an issue in this. So from the bottom of the market, it may appear that yes, everything did well. But when you take 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, then only few did well. And in such a scenario, only a lopsided market scenario, it becomes very difficult, or the probability of choosing and winning drops, and that the outcome of that is reflected now. And that is where I'm getting to that. The reason is probability has come down, and the reason, the crux of the reason is that. So my objective of telling is this is to tell you the reason. Now, whether this reason change, yes, probably whenever the economy is more broad-based, if out of 100 stock 40 start doing well, then suddenly the probability rises, and then the probability of active funds doing much better comes up in that case.
Yes. So Shreyas, you manage a large cap fund also and mid cap fund also. If you see the valuation differences available in both these category, so do you see a lot of value into mid and small cap stocks at this point of time?
Quality and growth stock in both large and mid and small as well are expensive. If you want a quality and growth mid cap small stock, it is as or more expensive than a non-quality, non-growth large cap stock. If you want a quality and growth small cap stock, it is as expensive, or actually even more expensive than large cap and mid cap stock, because there is less liquidity there and you have to pay even liquidity premium there. So by choosing a category that you are not solving your problem of valuation.
Sure.
Okay. So if you think that by choosing a category or other, if you're solving that problem, the answer is no.
Okay.
So when I choose, in my mid cap fund, my mid cap stocks which are good are probably as or more expensive than my large cap stock. And that's where when I look at multi cap as a strategy, at that point in time, I make that choice that yes, compared to this mid cap, whether this large cap is better, then I choose a large cap. If I think no, this mid cap is better, then I may choose that mid cap. But if large cap is better, then I end up choosing the large cap.
Sure. But in 2018 and 19, with IL&FS crisis and all, mid caps valuation has generally gone down. So due to that, we had seen a depressive period for mid and small cap category in 18 and 19. So this again, after post-COVID, the cost of capital is low. So due to that, mid caps currently are finding a lot of valuation.
Right.
Yes.
But those are the spurts. See, normally what happens that you will observe that from the bottom they are done well because they fall more, lot more. In 17, 18, 19, 20 they underperform, so they come up relatively better in stock performance. Probably yes. But then if you are a good investor who can time well and anyway looking for 2-3 year period and just timing well in and out, then it is good. But then if you look at 5 year, 6 year, 8 year SIP performances of these, then probably you will get a different picture. So one need to choose. So whether I am a good investor who can advise you to yes, invest in mid cap today and exit 1.5 year hence, and I will come here and tell you now exit mid cap. Probably I don't have that that expertise to tell you. So that's where I don't get into this. That yes, mid cap is better now, and now large cap is better. And probably the proof is that you take 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and especially if you see SIP return, then you don't you will get your answers to this, whether mid cap is good or not, or at current level or not, or at whatever levels. So always in a rally from bottom, they will perform, and that gives you illusion that they will perform, but it doesn't happen that way. So what has done well in mid cap and small cap? That one we need to look at. So just pre-COVID, in mid cap and small cap, chemical and retail industry should do extremely well. Post-COVID, retail industry faltered and chemical stood out. Rest of the companies in mid cap and small cap, I don't think they have gone beyond their earlier 2018 highs. Only chemical industry, in my opinion, would have gone above their 2018 highs.
Sure, sure. And Shreyas, in terms of managing behavior, so how do you manage your behavior? Let's say I know you have been a very quality oriented focused investor most of the times. And we have seen times, I think in 2008 and I think post COVID currently also, a lot of non-quality companies are going up considerably. And a lot of competition funds have been outperforming, let's say, in this period. And I think as an investor and as an advisor, this is also my dilemma. In certain period, you see your portfolio underperforming compared to the markets or the peer group. And I think investing is all about managing behavior. So in that period, how do you actually manage your behavior? It is always great to talk about fundamentals, but when you underperform and when you are in a very competitive industry, how do you ensure that you stick to the basics and remain there?
Okay. So I'll just highlight at least this scratch is how I would have thought about it. First of all, you have to identify problems. So yes, you're highlighting the right problem. From April till now, I would have underperformed. Yes. So now then what I do is whether this is I've done good on YTD and a 1 year basis. Probably yes. So that underperformance is not as much when you look at YTD and 1 year. Now, why that underperformance has come in post April till now and not YTD and 1 year basis so much? Because you didn't fail much during March fall, right? So if you didn't fail much, so obviously while rising you will not rise as much. And so don't so whether I should bother about that, so I generally just to keep a noise away, I would not bother about it, because what will happen in a fund, the investors who are investing for 1 year, since 1 year, 2 year, their probably, or whoever is doing SIP, so their money which is going at April, May, June, that money will fetch lesser return. But the bulk of the money which is there already till February end or March end, that money would have got their fair share. Right? Now, coming to more objective question here is because obviously at any point in time in a fund, whoever comes, he should get good return. It is not that only someone who came earlier should get good return. So it's not that I'm saying that one should not look at April onwards also. So April onwards, now let's get more objective about it. So then one should try to attribute. You use the word actually non-quality went up. Actually, I'm saying that didn't happen. What happened is actually quality has gone up and growth has gone up even that. Probably there could have been a period in July, August, if I'm not wrong, and not even September. Actually, there was a period in June latter half and July and August first half, wherein everything and anything under the sun went up. But if you look at YTD and 1 year, you will notice that quality and growth has outperformed again. And but what has changed is, as I was highlighting earlier, the pecking order of growth has changed. It is not that market has given up quality. So whether you will notice that in the stock performances of two companies in one sector, if you just take retail industry, highly leveraged apparel industry companies stock was still half, and less leveraged apparel industry retailer stock was just down 20%. So that's where I don't agree with the observation that non-quality went up. Actually, quality went up during this period, or quality outperformed during this period in individual sectors also. But when it comes to overall sectors, what happened was this retail credit growth story fell down, and retail story fell down. So what I did during this period, if you notice my funds February versus now, or last month end, September month end, the changes which were done during this period were to address this issue. That yes, the pecking order of growth has changed. So if you are having lesser exposure to some sectors whichever are having lesser growth, higher growth in new world. So now you were betting on retail credit growth and you were betting on retail industry. Post COVID world, that growth has come down. So you have to bet more on the companies which are doing well in the post-COVID world on a relative basis. And that's where the allocation to pharmaceuticals, IT, and some of the companies which are doing relatively better even today, there that allocation would have gone. And one of the observation you might have had is I always had very high cash in the portfolio since for last 2.5 years. So 2018, 19, even 20 till pre-COVID, I had a very high cash. It's not. It was the cash was not because of COVID and all. I never expected this to happen suddenly. It was more because of the reasons which I highlighted earlier, that narrow economy, few opportunities, and that's where the cash. So what I did was, whether I deployed that in these companies wherein I found that relatively growth is higher and they are good quality also, and that's how it got allocated, and that's what where the changes were done during this time period. So try to be more objective is the only way out, rather than trying to be reactive to something.
But Shreyas, again, this is again a very, very debatable question on the cash portion in the fund. As an advisor, as a client, I manage my debt equity myself. So at a fund level, if the cash levels is changed, doesn't it impact my overall debt equity ratio on an overall basis? If the fund, as a fund manager, you are managing a lot of cash. I don't understand, is it going to impact my final returns in long term?
So if you look at the long term, so if you take 1 year, probably it would not have hurt you. If you look at 2 year, 3 year, definitely would not have hurt you. Because on 3 year basis, market is there, right? That's being highlighted around 11,000 now, probably 700 point higher than that. So 3 year basis probably no, but this outcome, the cash was, as I said, was the outcome of these things what I highlighted, that only few companies and not many opportunities, and that's where it helped earlier. So yeah, your question is valid, that whether I as a fund manager, one should be taking it or not. So it is allowed up to 20%, and I use it only up to that. It is not that one just go beyond whatever is allowed in this. And more important is in this cash thing, and again deploying back, whether the other allegation or other observation also comes up always, that that whether we are changing with time, whether it is reflection of pessimism, that yes, market is going to fall, whether it is reflection of that. The answer is no. That has never been a reflection of that, and I always that's why I urge you to observe that that the sectors changed during this period. So 2017, auto was somewhere around 18% of the music one. 2018, when I saw the cycle not turning as good, I reduced it to almost 6%. Now the cash got created. You deployed eventually some of it in IT towards the end of 2018. At the same time, something else altered, so you removed from that. And as I said, for me, that has been more outcome of this cyclically, some industries changing their growth pattern, and then probably predicting ahead of time, or whatever you call it, with the outcome, you can say you predicted it earlier. You try to act on it that way. So I'll just try to highlight what was the thought process behind that, and even I try to highlight to you what is the thought process when I deployed it. So when they ask, then yes, whether today the world is better than pre-COVID, and that's where the high cash deployment is there, the answer is no. So by that logic, the cash should not have been deployed. But then I thought that yes, now the opportunity is relatively on the risk reward basis, the market will go to relatively fast growing sectors, and that's where we try to deploy it, rather than try to deploy it in the same sectors which are getting hurt and which you already own.
Sure. Thank you so much. I think we have one question. Mr. Dalal, you want to ask one question to Shreyas? Sorry, I think we seem to be missing him. No problem. So thank you very much, Shreyas, for your honest answers, and we truly got a lot of insights from you. And thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Shreyas. Thank you, viewers, for attending this session. Thank you.